My parents had both died in homes.
Okay.
And I knew as a single, divorced woman that and with no children, I was like, well, what's going to happen to me? It was said, I kind of want to live like the Golden Girls.
Yeah.
Because when I'd say to people, I want to live, have alternative housing as I get older, and so I don't end up in a nursing home. My next step is to be able to show people, come to see my house. This is how you can live. So you're aging in community. Because a lot of people talk about aging in place. I'm not a fan of aging in place.
So when you were watching the Golden Girls TV series, did you know the first time you watched it that you were going to be in a position where you would kind of like be bringing that to life? All right, guys, welcome back. Rodrigo Fonador here with another episode of Asheville Real Estate News. Really excited about what we're talking about today. We're talking about community, intentional living, and it also segues into something that we're seeing in Asheville a lot, which is affordable housing, and really, really interesting and great unique twist to this, especially for people who are moving into the retirement age and are doing it in a unique way, and something I didn't even know that was a possibility or something I wouldn't have initially thought of. So I'm here with Marianne Kilkenny, and she's been on this journey for over 10 years exploring how to do this. She's an author, she's a speaker, teaches conferences, so we're about to have a lot of golden nuggets and hopefully get lots of questions answered for you, or at least start a conversation. Marianne, thanks so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So you moved to Asheville in 2006, if I recall correctly, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And what happened between 2006 and 2007 when you started the Women for Living in Community, organization or movement?
Probably the most important thing was that I really wanted to do something different. My parents had both died in homes.
Okay.
And I knew as a single, divorced woman that and with no children, I was like, well, what's going to happen to me? So that was sort of the impetus. I moved to Asheville from Silicon Valley. I had been in human resources for a very long time. And in moving here, what happened was I went to a conference that was called Intentional Communities for the Second Half of Life. There was 145 people at what's now ALE. And at that, they said, a couple people said, oh, here's two people that have moved here from California and want to do this. And it was like, I thought we were going to be trampled because there was all these people that ran over and said, when, what are you doing? What are you going to do? And we'd just moved here 3 weeks before. And so we knew, so it was obviously there's a demand here. So a year later, I always said, I kind of want to live like the Golden Girls.
Yeah.
Because when I'd say to people, I want to live, have alternative housing as I get older, and so I don't end up in a nursing home. And that sort of makes people feel really depressed. So
it's a hard topic though, right?
Yeah.
To like engage around in a way that's like an upbeat, creative manner.
Right. People want to deny the fact that we are all aging. That's probably the only thing that we have in common is that we're all aging, and people want to deny that. But I really wanted to get out in front for myself, and in turn for those of us that are I'm an older boomer, and so to say, I don't want what happened to my parents to happen to me. So what I did is at that conference and thereafter, we had meetings, we had more meetings, and everybody talked about wanting to do this.
What was the first thing after like the meeting, good ideas, momentum. What was that first action step?
The first action step was actually taking it from meetings, and I did a conference which was for Women for Living in Community, from dreaming to doing. So I thought that was a great title because it was saying we can't just keep talking about it. We need to actually take action and do something. So what I did was after that conference is I started a variety of different groups with the intent of saying, okay, no one else is going to do this for you. You need to do it for yourself. So what I then did is I actually bought 2 houses in an infill in Oakley. And in a 3-house infill to say, well, if nothing else is going to happen, maybe I can start my own little community here. And for 3 years, it was great. And then the next step that I took, which was my taking action, sort of an exploration, was to move into a house with 5 adults. And that's the house that we were interviewed on NBC News around. Yeah.
And so how was that? Like,
it was great.
Yeah.
I mean, it was great. Mainly, there were lots of things that were challenging because I lived by myself for a really long time, on and off.
So that's quite the contrast there.
Yeah, but the important thing is, and this is one of the things I say about in my book, is to make sure that you know what the dynamics is with the people.
Like what the framework is for everything?
Yeah, well, there's the physical layout. No, do you share a bathroom? No, don't do that. How many kitchens are in the house? How many times are you going to run into people? That kind of thing. And we actually had ways to get along. We had weekly meetings. We had agendas.
Like a social contract.
Yeah.
Kind of were like your own. I don't know, like had your own little political infrastructure there, almost in a way, so you could.
Luckily, it wasn't too political. But because
there was expectations and like you had a way to resolve conflict, I'm guessing, and things like that.
Right.
So looking back on that experience, how long ago was that?
That was 2010, 2000 to 2015, about 4 years.
What would be a kind of, maybe what do you say, be a really good highlight memory that you have, and maybe a low light where you're like, yeah, I'm glad I'm not doing that anymore.
Well, I think probably the best one was sort of a goofy one, and that was I was making something, and I didn't have any honey, and do I have to go to the store, go all the way to Ingles? So I texted all my housemates, and it was great. There was a knock on the door, and 3 of them were standing there with jars of honey.
That is a good one.
I mean, it's you know, along with the other one was I went to look at my eggs, and there was one egg that had a smiley face on it because that meant someone had come into my kitchen and borrowed an egg, and I didn't even know and replaced it. Yeah.
So I mean, that's important to you, right? Because it's all about community, right?
Yeah, and I mean, and there's a lot of trust involved there. You know, probably the most difficult thing was when there was somebody that was unhappy, you know, in the house. And, you know, it's kind of like they say, when mama's unhappy, everybody's unhappy, or anybody in the house is unhappy. It has a way of sort of...
The energy, right? Yeah,
it's hard in the house, you know, where you have agreements that you're going to get along if you're not.
Yeah.
And it was nothing, it was just a different, you know, it was the way people have different expectations of how they want to live.
Everybody's meant to live together, right?
Oh gosh,
I've had that a couple of experiences. Like, I'm really good friends with you, and then you like become a housemate, and it's like, oh my goodness, like this is not working.
You do what?
Yeah. Like different levels of normal is really interesting.
Oh yeah.
I know you've obviously explored this topic a lot, and I'm sure it's evolved over the last, you know, I guess it's almost 20 years now, if I'm doing my math correctly. Where are you in the stage of the idea versus concept and like reality now? Like what are you focusing on now? What are you learning? What's next?
Well, what's next for me is I've always had the dream of living in a community, and I have done all these explorations along the way. I have yet another iteration that I live in now, which is a small neighborhood that's sort of organically evolved. So the next iteration is I bought a piece of property 2 years ago that adjoins the property I live in now. And I recently sold it to a developer, and he is planning on putting 10 modular houses, and I'm designing one, and 2 friends are designing theirs. Okay. And in the perfect world, there'd be my community.
Right. And that project's coming along well, or how far into it are you so far?
Luckily, I'm not too far into it because it's the developer now that's done it. And we're probably, my plan, my plan is...
That always goes well, right?
Right, is by Thanksgiving to be in that house. And that house, you know, people say to me, well, why are you moving? It's spitting distance from where you live right now, and you have a great house. And I want a house that some people talk about, what I like to call it is my forever house, meaning I'm going to live there until I'm not in this universe anymore. And what that needs to have universal design, meaning I can have wider hallways, there aren't stairs to get in, and that's critical to me. And my job is to be able to show people, come to see my house, this is how you can live, So you're aging in community. Because a lot of people talk about aging in place. I'm not a fan of aging in place because lots of people age in place so they don't go to those places, and then they do.
And what is those places?
They're usually nursing homes. Yeah, nursing homes. And there's really nice ones. Who knows? But that isn't my goal. I want to have alternative housing for people as we age. And that's been my goal for the last 12 years.
10 years from now, this community and the vision that you have for it, what is it?
It's the kind of thing that I say, gee, I want to go to the movies. I don't have to send 500 texts and,
just go knock on 10 doors?
Yeah, I just go to 4 doors
Right.
or and say, hey, and I get my exercise because I'm, or I get to go and do my gardening. And that way all of us can drive down Beaver Dam Road.
Right.
Or I'm going to Ingalls. Hey, anybody need anything? I'm going to go and I'll bring it back.
Okay.
I mean, it's so that we're not having to do the things that most worry elders.
Yeah.
And that is, will I be able to get around?
Yeah.
Will I have companionship? Will I be bored to tears? I want the opposite of all those things.
Right. So when you were watching the Golden Girls TV series, did you know the first time you watched it that you were going to be in a position where you would kind of like be bringing that to life?
Oh no. But what I did realize is in doing the research on it was how, it's still, people still are watching it and they're a lot younger than me.
I was surprised. I'd never heard of it until started getting acquainted with your idea and what you've done with it, which has been amazing. But it's a very well awarded show.
Yes.
Like the accolades it's received has been very impressive. Have you found that any of your experience have mirrored anything that's happened on the show? And when did you link like the fact of what you were doing to being like the Golden Girls was a good way to explain it?
I think that was the number, like I said, the number of times I said, people, I'd say, I want to have alternative housing for people as we age because blah, 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 blah. And people get depressed. And like they'd be turning around at the cocktail party and I was like, wait, that one. So I said, and it came to me, I don't even remember how, but because I'm sure I'd watched the show.
Right.
And the camaraderie and the laughter and there was a certain amount, they touched on lots of real life situations. So it wasn't like abstract in any way. And the relationships of those people and the relationships that they had outside of their own sphere was the kind of thing that gave me the thought of, well, yeah, some of them have boyfriends. One of them left a nursing home because she tried to burn it down. That's the mother. And there's really interesting relationships, and they all have their own unique characters that they're not melded into one particular kind of person.
Coexisting.
Yeah, coexisting and doing a pretty good job.
So with being part of human resources and it seems like a lot of your focus around this is the community-centric living arrangement.
Right.
Has community always been something that's been, let's say, passionate? Something that's been passionate for you? Or when did you realize that was such a pillar to everything that you're doing?
When I looked back on how I grew up, I grew up on a college campus. My dad was a college professor. And I lived on the campus. And the more I thought about it, we lived on one level. The second level was a piano teacher and another woman. And on the top floor was probably the oldest person. And there was no elevator or anything like that. And that reminded me that these people all lived together in some large brick house in the Midwest. And it wasn't until I looked back and said, I'd run next door because my mom worked to the neighbors. Right. So that was, I didn't know I was a latchkey kid. They didn't have that name then. Right. So that was sort of inbred in...
It was your normal from a very early age.
Yeah, until, my parents thought they found the American dream and moved off the college campus and bought a house. And there we were, stuck way out in the burbs. And it changed. Right. It changed, but they must have done something to my DNA to say,
well, you have something to go back to, right?
Yeah. And I just, thinking back on that, I was like, the oldest person was at the top of the stairs.
Yeah, I guess now you think about that, you're like, what, how is that happening?
And she probably was a lot younger than I am now.
Oh, really?
But she
Well, it's
seemed
all
very
perspective,
old.
right? Yeah.
Right.
How old were you when that happened? Or when you guys were living on a college campus?
I lived there probably from the time I was born until I was about 10, probably. Yeah.
I'm very curious about the nudge. I was hoping you could shed some light on what that is, and for, probably not a ton of the people who are tuning in right now are going to be familiar, but enlighten us.
Well, it's the grand nudge.
The grand nudge.
I mean, that's important.
True.
So when I left Silicon Valley, moved to the South, I had often been told I was rather direct and blunt. And I thought, how's that going to play in the South? So I thought, what can I do? Because what had happened is, as I talked to people and spoke and did meetups and things like that, people would say to me, yeah, someday I think I'll do that. And I wanted to say,
Someday's now.
Are you getting any younger?
Yeah.
No. So I needed to figure out how to do a little bit of the elbow to nudge people along. So that's what the grand nudge is. It's sort of my alter ego. That so when she shows up, when I've been going along, I can say, you getting any younger?
Yeah.
And sometimes she wears, glasses and rhinestones.
Own persona.
Yeah.
And have you found much success with that? I thought that was so fun, just like reading about that.
It's fun for me, and I've given talks, where I whip out the rhinestone, and the tiara, and people, and it's like either they think I'm wackadoo but I have fun with it. So to sort of bring that out. And sometimes I actually don't even do that part, but I'm saying, oh, the grand nudge just showed up, and here's what she has to say. And she's in my book, because that way I can get sort of a little bit of the prodding in there without it sounding like preaching. There's a humor in it.
Yeah, no, I thought that was such a good way to, because like as we said at the beginning, it's not the easy conversation all the time, right? Like, hey, things are going down the path. Like, unless you do something now, it's not going to make it easier to do it 5 years from now.
Well, that's the other thing. A lot of people say, well, I'm just going to wait until I'm 80.
And then it's too late, right?
And I want to say, who's going to want you in their community because they get to take care of you?
You need to build that community ahead of time,
right?
So, what's been your favorite part of this process or journey that you've been on?
Boy. Probably telling my experiences, and being able to give, this is, the honey story, or the having the media also certainly didn't hurt. That's been really fun to be able to say I was on television or any of those kinds of things, because it then what that does in this environment is it gets the word out in a way that I could never have ever done.
And it validates what you're doing, right?
Sure, that didn't hurt.
Yeah, no doubt. So obviously we live in Asheville, and affordable housing and all these things that have to do with being able to live in Asheville are hot topics right now. Do you have any insight as far as some of your concepts, even though it might be targeted towards people who are on, the last, retiring and that part of their life, that you think are applicable for people who are in their, say, early 20s or 30s who are still looking on, coexisting, co-living, and I think it's really insightful, right? Big house, lots of people, costs go down naturally.
Sure. And I think it doesn't matter the age. I think I lived when I was in my 20s with other people.
Right.
And I think sometimes as we age, people will say, you mean like when I was in college?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. The only difference is, my advice is you're more of yourself.
Right.
As we age. When I was 20, I was a lot more flexible, and I knew the semester was going to end. Right. Is the other thing, and so
you can deal with more variables.
Yeah. But all of the things that can be done in shared housing, whether it's in San Francisco and the big things that they're doing there in order for people to be able to afford to live together, those are all concepts that can be very well done as people age.
What do you say to the people who are like, hey, I like your idea, but I'm not going to own a house. I'm basically renting.
Yeah.
What do I do? Isn't that important?
Sure. I mean, that's one of the things that I like about some of the concepts that are coming out, where people partner with somebody who wants to invest money, who looks at the possibility of a shared house and the return on their investment that they can get from that. So it's marrying the things together that, gee, I want to rent. I don't want to buy. I don't want the responsibility of that. But somebody else that might have that as a possibility in the business model says, I mean, and the other thing, I can't think of a better solid bunch of people who
That's
are
a
going
good tenant base, yeah.
Right, who are going to, even if they're already getting Social Security, that comes in every month.
Yeah.
They probably don't have wild parties.
Probably.
No, maybe a few.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. So if somebody's interested in learning a little bit more about you and like wants to dig into this concept of, community and what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably to my website. Okay. It's womenforlivingincommunity.com.
And I'll say this, I have spent some time on it. It's not just for women.
Good point.
I do want to be clear about that. Like, if you are curious about doing like the whole housing thing and learning how to coexist, it's lots of good resources, good conversation starters.
And I realized back when I started this in 2007, a lot of people get that illusion of like, is it just for women? Yeah. How come it's just for women? And it's like, my flippant answer is because I am one.
Yeah. I was building something for me, right? Like you were exploring something that was on your heart.
And what I added the for was to be able to say, we're the ones that are going to do it.
Right.
I just believe that women oftentimes are the ones that burn the home fires. That's why they give money in third world countries to the women, because they realize that that's going to go to a larger base. Not to be sexist.
Okay, yeah. I just last kind of question for tying things up here at the end. I know that I had some great experiences with roommates and had some not so great experiences with roommates. Do you have any insight for anybody at any age group as far as maybe certain questions or things to be aware of that, hey, if you're thinking about living with somebody, here are things to consider?
Sure. First of all, I would say they're housemates, because I've given up living in a room with somebody unless I'm in a different kind of relationship.
Fair enough.
So housemates.
Good clarification.
The whole
for housemates.
Yeah, they're housemates. And I think it is to sit down and really do an interview with somebody and not gloss over the things that you really realize are things that bother you. For instance, to say, I know that somebody making noise after 10 o'clock really bothers me. Well, you talk about that. You don't gloss over it. And when, I interviewed people for a living.
Right.
So I'm a little bit more straightforward about it. So when I used to interview people for our house, I'd have to say, I'd preface it by saying, now I used to interview for people for a living, so this might seem a little bit terse.
But it's almost better, right? Because then you have the hard conversations up front, and then in theory, avoid them on the back end, right?
And I think the other thing is, I've used the blueprint of We, which is a document. The blueprint
of what?
We.
Okay.
And it's a couple out of Flat Rock that when I first got here, people were saying community. Oh, well, you have to have all these legal documents. And now I came out of HR.
Yeah.
I didn't want to have anything to do with any more lawyers. So I learned about the blueprint of We, and it's about how everybody gets along, what your expectations are, what you look like on a good day and a bad day. And I did that in almost all of the housing situations that I have been in.
Yeah.
And that way, it makes it really possible for you to live together. And if somebody says, I don't want to do that, you say, okay.
Probably not a great fit then.
Yeah.
With all your experience, do you look back and do you have any of the housing situations where you would say it was a bad experience? Because sometimes it's different to have hard experiences versus bad experiences, right?
How do you differentiate between the two?
So a hard experience could be like, hey, that was challenging, but I learned a lot, I grew a lot. It actually ultimately didn't ruin that whole memory. It was that moment you acknowledge it was tough, and then it was good. But a bad experience would be like, oh my goodness, I could not wait to get out of there. It's just there's no good memories around it.
I'd like to say that I only had hard experiences and no bad, because I listened to the experts who I've now become to say, these are the things that you need to do. Okay. Every time you get that little inkling in your stomach that says, bad idea. And I have a pretty good sense of, I have a pretty good intuition.
Okay.
As long as I'm not selecting husbands.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's probably a little bit more challenging than, do right along with roommates, I guess, right?
Well, yeah. Never mind. I won't go there.
Fair enough. Cool. Well, thanks so much for hopping on. Would love to connect with you again, next couple months as your project, I think you said fall of 2018, right? So 6-8 months from now.
Right.
See how it all looks when it comes to fruition.
Yeah, well, I'm excited about it because it is, the pocket neighborhood concept was one that I really think works really well. This piece of land is gorgeous. So I think it'll work. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today.
Glad to.
All right, you guys, don't forget, we got a newsletter coming out. Check it out at avlrealestatenews.com. And if you want to connect some more with Marianne, please follow her online. And it's womenforlivingandcommunity.com, right?
Yeah.
And so definitely encourage you to check that out. And if you have any questions, tag somebody. Let us know in the comments, and we'll make sure that we get all the questions answered and hopefully encourage good conversation. Thank you so much, and have a good one. Until next time.